Normally when you hear the term Moon Watch, you immediately think of the Omega Speedmaster, but Omega is not the only company with lunar credentials. Today on the Budding Watch Enthusiast is my full review of the Bulova Lunar Pilot, a modern rendition of the Moon Watch that you might not have heard of. So as we get into this review of the Bulova Lunar Pilot, let's touch on the history of this watch briefly, because this watch is actually a reissue of a very historically significant watch. So there was a Bulova Moon Pilot chronograph prototype that Bulova made for NASA in the 70s. And this prototype watch was actually worn by Captain Dave Scott during the Apollo 15 mission in 1971. So if you ever wondered why this watch has a very Speedmaster-esque aesthetic, it's because, much like the Speedmaster was at the time, the watch had to adhere to specifications that NASA actually had for it. Dave Scott's original watch actually ended up selling at auction a couple of years ago for over $1.6 million. And I guess because of that, Bulova thought that they could make a special edition reissue of the watch, which they did do in 2015 in stainless steel. And then a couple of years later, in 2017, we have this black special edition version of the watch that you do see here today. So like I said, a very historically significant watch. Let's start with the case of this watch. So we have a black ion-plated stainless steel case with a blasted finish. Now, ion plating is very similar to PVD coating in terms of the look and feel that it gives the watch. Honestly, I'm not sure which of those two methods is better than the other. I think some people will tell you ion plating is more durable, I guess. Again, it's not something I've done a lot of research in, but you do have that on this watch here. If we flip over to the side here, we do see a signed crown. Kind of difficult to see here because of the black on black aesthetic, but it is signed with the Bulova logo, as well as these flat pushers for the chronograph. You have the start-stop top, and then the reset down here at the bottom. If we flip this over around to the back, we have a screw-down case back that does have a special stamp commemorating the Apollo 15 mission that you see here, also done in black. And this is a very nice touch as well, again, just to let you know the history of the watch. And because this crown is not a screw-down crown on this watch, the watch only does have a 50-meter water resistance, and honestly, I don't know if I would even take it into 50 meters of water myself personally. So if we're looking at the Lunar Pilot's dimensions, we have a width of 45 millimeters on this watch, a lug length of 52 millimeters, a height of 13.5 millimeters, assisted by that box sapphire crystal that you see there, and a strap width of 20 millimeters. So we do have this black bezel here that simply exists to house the box sapphire crystal that is flat going across the top of the dial, and again gives the watch a really cool side profile in my view. We do have a tachometer scale that does outline the outer edge of the dial. Going in from there, you do see the minute markers or second markers going around in that track that's right inside the tachometer. And this track here, and I'll try to get a closer view, is actually recessed below the main dial, which gives a little bit of added depth to the watch. And of course, you also see the 0.2 second hash marks in between the seconds/minutes on this watch as well. You have applied hour markers here with more square-shaped markers at the cardinal points on the watch to help with orientation. So let me go ahead and get the chronograph started so we can take a look at the 3 registers that are on this watch for that, and a nice satisfying click with these pushers as you push them in. So spinning there, you see the 1/10 of a second markers that can measure 10 seconds on the chronograph register. Down at the bottom here, you do have a running seconds hand. It's a little bit obscured by the minute marker there, but as you can see, that is actually ticking twice per second. That is, of course, for the main time telling of the watch. And then over here, you have a 60-minute totalizer for the chronograph. Now, you see the 10th of a second hand did stop running. It will only run for the first 30 seconds that the chronograph is activated, and then it will stop. But if we do press the stop button to stop the chronograph, it does slide around to the point where you did stop it. So even though going past 30 seconds, you can still track things down to about 1/10 of a second here. Now, for some reason, I've seen it advertised in more than one place for this watch that it has a 12-hour chronograph, and that is incorrect. This is definitely a 60-minute chronograph. The chronograph hand will stop after 60 minutes and will not continue further. So again, I don't know why folks have it advertised that way, but that is incorrect. If you do see it advertised as just a 60-minute chronograph. We do have this pointed stick hands for the hour and minute, and as well as this arrow-tipped hand for the chronograph second, of course done in white. And of course all of this is set against a matte black dial. It's tough to see, but the inset registers do have the little snail tracks in them to give them a little bit of depth as well. And we have the Bulova script that runs across the top of the watch at the 12 o'clock position. Now, the cool thing with this one, this uses the era-specific Bulova logo, whereas the stainless steel version uses the newer font that Bulova uses today. As far as the movement goes, this does contain a Bulova high-performance quartz chronograph movement that runs at a frequency of 262 kilohertz. This gives the watch a little bit better accuracy than you would normally find in a quartz watch. Most quartz watches will gain or lose around 10 seconds per month. This watch supposedly only gains or loses 10 seconds per year. So very accurate movement. Definitely a watch that you can certainly set it and forget it, basically, as you go along. And of course, with the chronograph, if we stop it and do hit the reset button, since it is a quartz movement, you do get the quartz wind around that is typical when you have a quartz chronograph. Now, as far as the strap that this comes with, the black version comes on a two-piece black leather strap that does have signed hardware, which is also black to match the case of the watch. Now, what's interesting is that the buckle side does have this extra piece of leather that passes underneath the bottom of the watch and kind of makes the watch strap behave sort of like a NATO strap. And before we get into the review portion of this video, I wanted to show you guys what the Bulova Lunar Pilot looks like on my 8-inch wrist. Again, this is going to fit me fairly well, despite the size. The benefits of having a bigger wrist is these longer watches typically do okay. But yes, like I said, plan accordingly if this is one that you are interested in picking up. So without a doubt, the dial on the Bulova Lunar Pilot is the star of the show here. I really like the fact that you have the sunken minute track that runs along the outside, and I like the fact that you have the inset subdials that have a little bit of depth to them as well, because like having these contrast in depths on the watch is really what gives the dial its life to me. Some folks are really going to be turned off by the tall crystal on this watch, and the tachometer scale kind of lords over the rest of the dial. Like, it sits really high compared to where the rest of the dial is, and I can definitely see that being a turnoff. I think it gives it a little bit of extra flair and a little bit of extra visual appeal that you might not normally see on this style, this very Speedmaster-esque style of chronograph. The dial's also really, really well laid out, I think, and it manages to feel pretty clean despite the amount of information that they're giving you on this watch. I think the reason most folks prefer bicompax layouts on chronographs is just because adding that third register can muddle things up a little bit, but I think they did a good job here, especially with the 3, 6, and 9 markers being these small rectangles that kind of get out of the way. Like, they're still very much there and present on the watch, but they do allow these registers to be spaced out a little bit, and I just think it helps with the overall legibility of reading all the information that this watch provides for you. Now, if you guys have been fans of the channel for a while, you do know that I do not like a running seconds hand on a quartz watch because it just reminds me that it is a quartz watch, but on this one, I mind it a little bit less. We'll say I mind it half as much as I normally do, just because it does tick twice per second. It gives this slight illusion of being something a little bit more than a quartz watch. So, like I said, I'll give it a little bit of a pass. Still, I would have just as soon preferred not to have it, maybe even have upgraded the chronograph movement to be multiple hours, and you could have put an hour totalizer there, and that would have been much better. Now, the thing about this watch is that it is a big watch. I don't care what any other review says, this watch is big. And I'm sitting here with an 8-inch wrist telling you that it's big, and it wears big. Like, that's just something you have to know going into this watch. Now, I've seen other reviews of this watch talking about how the black version appears slimmer than the stainless steel version, probably because the sides of the case just kind of mesh in with the aesthetic of the dial since it's all the same color. I kind of understand that, and I thought that as well when I first got it. That feeling goes away as soon as you put this on the wrist. Like I said, it does feel big. I know a 52 millimeter lug length is going to be a no-go for a lot of folks right out of the box. And I will say this watch did help me figure out what the maximum size is that I'm willing to accept on any watch, basically. And actually, that gets me to the pushers as well. So I do like this style of pusher, this long, flat style of pushers. But weirdly enough, I think this would have been better if the hinged end was sticking out a little bit further. And the reason why I think that is because when you look at these pushers, especially on the black version, they almost look like this is just the side of the case. Like, they almost look like a natural extension of the case. So what that ends up doing is it actually makes the case look even like, you know, 1.5 millimeters to 2 millimeters wider than it normally would, just because of how the pushers are designed on this one. So I appreciate the different style, and again, this is specific to the original watch that was made, but it just makes the watch look that much bigger. Now, the leather strap is a little bit better than I guess I expected it to be. It is very supple, and it is very thin, which is also a nice thing, and especially if you're going to have this pass-through part. You're going to want this to be as thin as possible as to not add any extra height to a watch that's already kind of tall for a quartz chronograph. And actually, in general, I did try this watch on a few straps, a couple NATO straps, and a couple other two-piece leather straps. And I will say that I do prefer wearing it on a two-piece strap as opposed to a one-piece strap, just because, again, the added height just makes it that much taller. One of my biggest annoyances with the watch, though, I'm going to tell you, is the strap width. Now, again, I know that it is very intentionally designed off of the prior design. They wanted to get it as close as possible. But why, oh why, did Bulova go with 20 millimeters instead of 22 millimeters with this watch? Again, I talked about the fact that the watch feels big and wears big, and the strap width is something that actually assists in that, because you're taking an already wide watch head and bringing it down and narrowing it to this very narrow strap width, and again, it just makes the bulk of the watch head look that much wider. I know it's only 2 millimeters, but when it comes to straps, 2 millimeters can make all the difference in the world. So if this was 22 instead of 20, I think it would have helped out just a little bit more with making the watch feel a little bit better proportioned. Now, this watch does retail for under $600. You can get them on the pre-owned market for about half that, which is where I got this one from as well. And I will definitely say what you're getting for the money with this watch is definitely worth it. This is still a price point where you're not going to probably find any mechanical chronographs. If you're going to get a quartz movement, you might as well get one of the more accurate quartz movements that you can find. And again, one of the other huge benefits of this watch is the historical significance that it has. Like I mentioned at the top of the review, when you normally hear the term Moon Watch, the first watch that you immediately think of is an Omega Speedmaster. But this Bulova Lunar Pilot is, of course, a genuine moon watch in its own right as well. So if the appeal of owning a watch inspired by history is appealing to you, then that certainly adds to the value that this watch has as well. All in all, I think the watch is excellent. Of course, if you couldn't tell during the review, I don't know if it's a watch for me. Again, it's just a little too large. And again, I think more than anything else that this watch has, the size is really going to be the make or break factor for a lot of folks, whether or not you're interested in picking up this Bulova Lunar Pilot. And if you can get down with the larger size, you're going to find yourself with a pretty fun, pretty good chronograph at a pretty decent price, I do have to say. So guys, that is it for my review of the Bulova Lunar Pilot. Let me know your thoughts on this watch in the comments down below. If you found this video informative or entertaining, do me a favor and hit that like button down there below. If you're new to the channel, thanks for checking it out, and hit the red subscribe button and the bell icon if you liked what you see so you never miss an episode that I post. And of course, if you want to follow me on Instagram, head on over to @buddingwatchenthusiast on Instagram and just click that follow button. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I will see you all the next time.